previously in this Consuming Watson Services with Python on the bluemix environment course, and we've created an application which can detect language. So your users can now use any language, but your application maybe only understands English or Spanish or French or German or whatever. So you need to be able to translate the users communicating into a language as your application. The source code for this is in the companion code episode 2. We're going to be using Django in this iteration. The Flask source is there, so you can actually have a look at that, but we're just going to be sticking with Django. First, let's look at the view that controls this. We've made a little bit of simplifications because there's a lot more functionality that we're going to be adding in. So we've taken out and refactored the code and created some functions. For the top, we've created a new function called identify language, which will, given some input data, identify the language that your users are communicating in. We've hard-coded a default target language of English. If the language that the users are using is not our target language, we check for available translations, and if we find an available translation, we perform the translation. We've got a new helper function which still has the hard-coded service credentials. At least they're only in one place in this module. Our identify language module function looks very similar to what we had previously, just refactored into a function. Our check for translation module iterates through the models that are returned and looks for a match for a translation from the source to the target, the source that we've detected and the target that we want to translate into. And our perform translation simply performs the translation from the source to the target. So let's just switch in our Django terminal, which has our Django virtual environment. I'm going to switch to episode 2. And we're now ready to try our application. So we run it locally, open a browser, we'll close the Flask version because it's just getting confusing. They look the same. Just check this is the Django version. If it is, we'll take 1000. There, so we submitted some German text which our application can't translate, which is okay because at least our application understands and it can say, I don't understand, can you use a different language please? We try French and our application has been able to translate that. It's been able to find a model that has that translation and has performed the translation. So now we're ready to push this application into bluemix, but before we do that, there's some changes we need to make sure that this application will run on bluemix. The first one is to modify the manifest file with a unique application name. And this is the name we use to push into bluemix, and also the name that we use to trace the logs, and the host name which is used in the URL. Save the file. modify runtime txt to be the version to match the version of Python that we have locally. The manifest file in Django runs a bash shell and runs the command file run.shell, which is this file. And we do this because it allows us to do things like perform database initializations and migrations. It also allows us to create a temporary shell and send in a Python command. And this Python command is a flat file. There's no indentations because the pipe can't cope with indentations, so it's flat file, performs some database admin initializations. And in this case, it's actually creating our super user. That super user is going to be useful because that will allow us to log into the administration function, which has a URL of, in our case, what's an admin. And now we are ready to push the application. First, we'll go and delete a previous instance that was created. And now we're ready to delete it. Just check on the dashboard that the application has gone, and it has gone. So now we can push our new application onto bluemix. The application is now started, so we can try it out. We know that we don't have a root, we do have a wlang. Try some French, which has been translated. We'll try another language, which our application is unable to translate. It knows that it can't translate it, so it can respond appropriately. So now I'm going to take a little detour and show you. I'm going to show you the logging capabilities that we've put in. Now for Django, I'm using standard Python logging. So in the view file, I import logging and get a logger. And the logging is actually set in the settings file, which also has the secret key, which needs to be secure and outside of a source code repository, because it's used for certifying forms. And this logging, standard Python logging. In Flask, it's a little bit different because the Flask app has logging bound into it. So the Flask app is initialized here, and logging is there. So, should you have any problems with your application, you can keep the logging in, just switch the logging levels up and down appropriately. And when you do have a problem, you can grab hold of the most recent logs. So keeping the log statements inside your code means that you're not chopping and changing print statements. There we are. you can actually see the application as it's logging the responses back from the Watson services. So now we have an application that is able to translate from the language that this user is entering into English.